As you can see, I am starting today's video with a hot cup of coffee because it is the basis for my life, the foundation for every writer. That's not true. Some writers drink tea. Some of them drink hot cocoa. I've even heard some drink cold beverages. But this is what life is made of. The creative life, anyway. There have been odes made to coffee and to alcohol too, but alcohol puts me to sleep. Now I'm going to do a little tour, a very small tour of my office because it doesn't consist of much. My desk, a hard copy of my previous book. This is actually one of the more intriguing parts of my writing life, and that is that every chapter of my last book became a scroll. I would print it, roll it in a rubber band, and put it in my lunch bag. That way, when I opened up my lunch bag, I was confronted with edits on my book. And I do like using a red pen, so that kind of editing works really well. Did you ever take writing classes? Yeah? When they still used red pens? I've heard that they have moved away from using red pens because red ink is supposed to be frightfully harming. But if you're actually writing and doing work and following the assignments, yes, this is my music stand. I actually had my phone placed on it earlier, and that's what I usually play music off of on my phone. I will look up tutorials or I'll look up songs and I'll watch people play. That is what I use instead of music, although at one time this stand used to contain music. I rarely use paper music anymore, and that's my accordion. So that is the extent of my office because I rarely sit down and write. This is actually a movable desk. It can sit, it can stand. It has this drawer on it because when it is to its full height at standing mode, it is not tall enough for me. I'm not that tall, I'm only 5'7", but it is apparently made for short people. I love the light that comes in this room, and if I have an opportunity to take some time to work on my laptop here, and of course I always play my accordion in this room as well, unless I have it out in the shed, but that doesn't happen very often, only when I feel like I'm going to be disturbing somebody. Yes, I still have this coffee. My Keurig. I know coffee snobs are anti-Keurig, but to me it's the easiest way to get a quick cup of coffee without having to make an entire pot or make a French press. I also have a couple of French presses, and I have been there in my life. I've been a coffee snob. I have, but now I think that if you get the right kind of coffee, that Keurig is just fine. It's strong enough. And it really honestly depends on how much water you use. That will define how strong it is. This is pretty strong. Yeah, I approve of it. It's good. And it happens to be very basic in that it is Starbucks. Oh my goodness. So I'm using a Keurig with Starbucks. How basic is that? I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure what the term basic means. Terms like that kind of are offensive. I think they're really reductionist. I don't like reductionist attitudes towards other human beings because all human beings are complex. Even if they follow popular trends, they're still complex human beings. Anyway, as I was saying, I really enjoy when I am able to sit or stand and use this office for hours at a time, but it rarely happens. The entire rough draft of my last book I wrote on my phone because it was a lot easier to whip my phone out of my pocket on my lunch hour after work. Like say I had to stay at work because I was going to have choir practice or another, whatever reason, I could just whip out my phone, and the time in between I clocked out and had to be somewhere else, I could work on my phone. It's really easy. I don't have to lug it around. I used to have a netbook in the old days when phones weren't so easy to use for writing. I actually, in those days, I knew some people who were using tablets to write books, and I thought that was just super crazy. Like, who would do that? Who would carry a tablet around and write? That just seems like a nuisance, but I understand now. It is so easy, and if you get into the habit of using that little keyboard on the phone, then it's very workable. It introduces all kinds of unique spelling errors because of autocorrect, but a lot of computers have autocorrect now anyway. But I used to have a little netbook, and it had maybe a 3/4 size keyboard, and it wasn't terrible. I used to carry that around, like say if we were traveling or something, and if I had a chance, I would work on it. But now I don't even have to carry a netbook because I'm so used to using my phone, and the Word program on my phone actually works really well. Not for editing, just for writing, and then it transfers, directly over to the Word program on my laptop, and then I can start editing there. Although with the program I bought, Atticus, I did most of my editing on Atticus, which I really loved. So if you don't have an Apple computer, if you don't have a Mac or an Apple of some kind and can get the program Vellum, Atticus is a really good replacement for that program. I've never used Vellum, but I've heard really good things about it. It does make creating print books and ebooks an easier process, and I found that that was the case with Atticus, and Atticus is still a work in progress. But still, it worked really well for me. I loved it because even if I couldn't do everything that I wanted to using Atticus, for example, you cannot just upload any font you want to the program. They just block those because they're afraid of copyright issues, I think, which I find a little odd because it's the author that's taking on the risk of using a font that they haven't paid for or that is not supposed to be used for commercial work. Every font comes with a license, and authors should be responsible, or publishers, depending on, if it's a self-publisher or an official traditional publisher. I guess self-publishers are official too. I feel like I am an official publisher. Some people might disagree with that, but you have less and less disagreement with that these days. 20 years ago, there was a huge stigma attached to self-publishing that there really isn't anymore. There are horrible self-published books, but there are a lot of really good books that are self-published, and I would say that the editing quality in good self-published books is as good as the editing from publishing companies, and that really isn't saying a lot because the editing really rests on just the author. That he doesn't have, like, they might send it to an editor, which I did for my last book, but they are still the final eyes and they are the author. So if they introduce errors into the text, then those errors are going to be there when it's published. But I've found that the editing in traditional publishing has gone downhill, and so it's kind of like met in the middle, where self-publishers have gotten better about their editing and traditional publishers have gotten worse. That's a sign of the times. Anyway, I do like to fire up the laptop and sit in this room and do some writing if I can. During the summer months, of course, it's still light till later in the evening, but during the winter, it's not as nice to use this room when I come home from work anyway, because it's dark outside, and it also doesn't make it as nice to play the accordion because I like to play the accordion while staring out the front window. It's a distraction that will hopefully keep me from bending my head to look at the keys that I'm playing. because that can be a real strain on the neck. Yeah. That brings me to another topic that I want to talk about today, and that is unique genres, because there are kind of genres within genres, and then there are genres that are sort of adjacent to other genres, and there's always evolving genres in the book world. Okay, so I was watching a video yesterday from the Cozy Creative, and I really like the Cozy Creative. I only just discovered her about a week or so ago, and when I discovered her, I sat down and watched all of her videos. Well, no, that's not true. I was actually cleaning the house, so I just listened to one video after another because I liked listening to her, talk about her writing career and her creativity. And in her most recent video, she talks about quirky books and quirky genres. And one genre that she said that she really liked is kind of a spooky, goofy, cozy, like gothic type of story. And I knew exactly what she was talking about because it is what I'm reaching for in my writing. It kind of encompasses all of the Gothic romances that I've read over the years, starting from 18th century Gothic, through the 20th century Gothic. So it incorporates that, and it incorporates all the comedy that I like as well, such as, P.G. Wodehouse is one of my favorite comedy authors. I also like comedic detective novels, like Emily Organ writes those, and I love her books. And it also incorporates supernatural elements, and it's what I've been trying to create, I think, from the beginning of my publishing career with Anna and the Dragon, which was the first book that I published, but not the first book that I wrote. But before that, I tried my hand at various genres like comedy and very classic detective stories, like more in the hard-boiled American style of detective story. And I had tried my hand at all those books, but when I got to Anne and the Dragon, it was a speculative fiction because it incorporated dragons, but in the real world, but it really didn't have an urban fantasy vibe, because urban fantasies always had some kind of weird romantic element, like Twilight, where the main character is in love with a vampire, or the vampire's in love with her. I don't know. I actually did try reading a couple of the Twilight books. Not my favorite, but I mean, it was not terrible. It wasn't like the worst thing I'd ever read, but not a genre that I would normally want to read. I'm not interested in the romantic elements with vampires, and nor would I be interested in romantic elements with a dragon. But in this story, and it did have romantic elements in there from the beginning, but what I was really reaching for was this sort of goofy, sort of dark, scary, but also really light, goofy, comedic, and with dragons. That's what I was going for with Anna and the Dragon. However, what happened is that since it was the first book that I published, I just adapted all of the criticism that people had given me. And one of them was, well, your tone's not consistent. It's dark and it's goofy. So is this a comedy, or is it a dark, horror, supernatural type of story? And I'm like, well, can't it be both? But I took it to heart and I evened out the tone so that by the end, it just became this gloomy tale. And for that reason, Anne and the Dragon, even though it's the book that at the time sold the best out of all of my books, I don't like it very much because it's really just gloomy. And I have heard from young women, young girls, like teenage, that it's their favorite book. Like, it's been passed around amongst teenage girls, and it's kind of like angsty and gloomy and dark, and so they like it. And if I were to try to read it nowadays, it'd be like, oh gosh, it's angsty and dark and depressing, and I don't like it. And the funniest thing about that a younger audience likes that book is that the main character starts out in the beginning part in her 20s and later in the book, because there's like sort of a time glitch that happens, she's in her 40s. So I never would have guessed that that age of heroine would even appeal to a young audience, but apparently it did and still does, because I still hear about it occasionally. But I'm not really getting sales because people are passing around their books. So I find that extremely weird and amusing, and I don't like Anna and the Dragon, and it's not what I wanted. When I published my book of short stories, The Jaybird's Nest and Other Stories, that one has a lot of those elements where you have fantasy and science fiction and a lot of supernatural elements and a lot of comedy. So that was really getting back to more of what I wanted to do. And then I went to science fiction comedy in the Miniverse, and that really felt like I was finally writing what I wanted to write, because it was comedy and I loved the Miniverse, and I just felt like I'd finally found my path. And then I decided that I had to write my Roswell alien novels. And yes, I have only published one, and it should have a sequel, and there will only be 2. And that one got a little bit more into that direction that I wanted to go with my books, which was the goofy, dark, but supernatural. And I think overall, I achieved that in Order of the Pentragon. It is meant to be kind of funny at times, even though it really is kind of dark. Like what's happening seems really, really dark. Like what the main character is at risk of is really dark. And that character is actually, in the book, she is 17. So I would think that that would appeal to a younger audience, the main male character, because there is a little, I mean, it's not the main point of the book, is the relationship between the two of them, but they kind of get thrown together, and they do develop a relationship with feelings toward each other by the end of the book. But he is 20 and she is 17, but they had been in high school at one time together, and so they get thrown together and captured by the aliens together. And yeah, it ended up being, instead of like goofy and comedy, it's more like, I would say, just a little weird. So it just tends more towards the bizarre than it does to that sort of goofiness that I really want. So I didn't really meet that until I wrote Delivering Hope, which is my delivery driver murder mysteries. So they're murder mysteries, ghost stories, and comedies. And so it's sort of incorporating all those elements that I want, and there's a certain coziness to it. And the way that I have found my way into that coziness is through Catholicism. So the characters are Catholic, and that kind of gives it a sort of softness, a coziness, that they have something that they believe in and that they can believe in together, and they can defeat the darkness because they have that. And of course, it's just it's pretty much just all out comedy in this book, even though there are dark and suspenseful moments. And same thing with the sequel that I'm working on now. And sometimes I think I'm just going way too far in the comedy, and I don't know, we'll see. I kind of felt like Delivering Hope was a huge mess when I went to sit down and do my edits, and I realized, as I read through it, I'm like, okay, it's not as much of a mess as I thought. So I have a feeling that the sequel is at that point right now where in my head it's this giant mess and it's getting way out of control. I tend to write, like I said, on my phone at the edges of my life, so I'm always really tired, and I think that exhaustion comes out for me in comedy. I know that like when I was writing Anne and the Dragon, I was like living off of coffee to wire me up, and then I was drinking wine to help me relax. So there's a lot of coffee and wine drinking. But in this book, you know, at this time in my life, I drink a couple cups of coffee in the morning. I rarely drink alcohol anymore. And so that, I don't know if that's really even a big thing in the book. It's more that it's just my brain is obviously, this is my brain off of not enough sleep and not enough time. And so it gets really bizarre. And that is where I'm at in creating this sort of goofy, I don't know what the genre would be called. There is a subset of murder mystery in which there are ghosts, and so there are supernatural elements. That is not, that is actually a subcategory even on Amazon, so it's a thing. However, I have found that it's a really mixed bag, whether the ghosts are real or if they're explained by natural, or if somebody's, you know, trying to scare people, or they're explained by natural phenomenon. Okay, so the book that I'm reading now, and I really don't like it, so I probably won't review it. I don't feel like I want to diss on other authors, because she obviously has an audience. She has a lot of people who buy her books and like her books, but to me this book is just, I don't like it. And I can already tell, even though I'm like 3/4 of the way through, that the ghosts aren't even real. And it's going to be a human person who's causing the problems or trying to scare people out of the old house that they're in because there's a treasure. And so it's really like Scooby-Doo, where the evil is unmasked, and so there's no horror anymore, and it's just a human being. But I actually want real, you know, real spooky characters. I want there to be real ghosts, and not just ghosts, but because ghosts are the spirits of people who have passed away, and demons are, you know, they're evil spirits. So there's a difference between those, and I wanted both of those elements to be in my books, I guess. And I want them to be real, but I also want there to be real murder mysteries that have to be solved. And that is where I've gone with my desire for this sort of goofy, supernatural, gothic, cozy gothic. That's where I've gone. That's the direction. And I really liked the way she said it, and I should go back and listen to the video. I can maybe put a link to the video that she just posted in the description, because the way she said it, it sounded like, yes, that's what I've always wanted. What she's talking about, this sort of cozy, goofy, gothic. You know, I don't think she used the word goofy, but that's my word, because I like everything to be a little on the goofy side. That's just who I am inside, I guess. So I will put a link to it. I love listening to her talk, but she has a really soothing voice, but also she's a little bit odd, and I recognize that oddness, and I'm just going to go very quickly over why I recognize that oddness. She talks about in one of her videos being unschooled when she for her education. Like, she never had any really formal education, except like in 2nd grade or something like that. So she was unschooled for her entire career and then did not go on to college. But when you are unschooled, yeah, you can. I knew some unschoolers who went on to college, so you can get formal education, but you have to really want that career, because otherwise you're already trained to have a lot of natural curiosity and to study. Like, you don't feel limited to having to go into a classroom in order to study and gain knowledge. And I think that's what is so appealing about her, is that she was unschooled. And my first experience with unschoolers was in high school. I knew the son of this family where they had unschooled their kids, and they ended up in high school because I guess the mom just really couldn't do it. And mostly they were unschooled because because the mom just wasn't up to homeschooling. And so yeah, they had to do self-education. But when I met this kid, I think I was a senior when he was a freshman, and he really couldn't get along with his peers because his experience was so outside theirs, like the books he had read, the music he had listened to, like he had listened to world beat music on KBOO, which was the college station. And his thought processes were so much more complex and advanced compared to his peers that he found a friend group in older students, and he's a lifelong friend. We still get together sometimes, usually once a year, maybe not, but yeah, he's a lifelong friend. And after that, of course, I decided to homeschool my children. I've talked about that before, but even though I was a Christian, I really got along better with the sort of hippie unschoolers than the fundamentalist Christians, because the fundamentalist Christians always had all these arbitrary rules that everybody had to follow. And I'm not interested in following other people's rules, call me a rebellious person, I don't know. But the unschooler families who had like hippie parents, they didn't have those rules. They just wanted to have fun with their kids and, go to the park and have play dates. This is just an example of what I mean. So we had sort of managed a peaceful network of some Christian homeschooling families with some unschooler families who were from, the parents were usually from the local college in Socorro. And so they were more like the hippie unschoolers, but everybody sort of dwelled in peace. And then one time this more fundamentalist Christian family decided that they were going to join our group, and they created this entire list of bylaws that they wanted everybody in the group to sign off on. And I was like, no, you don't get to come in our group and make us sign off on bylaws. Go start your own homeschool group. And we never really heard from that family again, because everybody said, no, we're not really going to sign on to your bylaws. And the funny thing about fundamentalist bylaws is that when I use the term fundamentalist, I'm referring to certain Protestant groups. Okay, the real Pharisaical Catholic people would be more like trad Catholics. Not all of them, I'm not going to paint with that broad of brush, but they tend to be a little more Pharisaical and rule-oriented in their way of living and thinking. But in the Protestant world, usually they're called fundies or something like that. And I say that, it sounds pejorative, but honestly, yeah, I got along with these people okay, but what I really didn't like was if they found out you were Christian, well, I mean, obviously they're going to. If they know that you're a Christian, they're going to try to hold you to their standard of living. And so if their standard of living is that, oh, women have to stay home, they can't go to college, they can't have careers, they have to do this, that, and the other, well, these are extra biblical, and I don't have to follow those rules. There's nothing in the Bible that says that I cannot go get a college education. And I actually did that when I was a part of the homeschool group. And so I did get some of that criticism from people who thought, well, no, you're supposed to stay at home and you're not supposed to have your own career. Well, why? Why can't I do that? Because the woman's role in the world is to support her husband, not have her own career. So hobbies were okay to these people as long as the hobby didn't get to be where it was more important than supporting the husband's vocation or caring for the kids. And obviously you don't want your hobbies to control you such that you're not caring for your children. I mean, I would never, even a career, yeah, if you had a career, you would not want to do that. So these people were not supportive to me when I wanted to go back to school, and they weren't supportive to me in my writing career. I mean, they were kind of, like if my writing was a hobby where I was writing, not very much. I remember being very frustrated when I had 4 kids and was homeschooling, like I had 2 little ones and was homeschooling the oldest 2 or 3. I can't remember whether the youngest was in kindergarten yet, but it was still a very frustrating time because I was having such a hard time meeting my goals in writing, and I wanted to complete a book. And I think at that time I was writing a comedy, think I was writing a comedy about an accordion player from Texas, and I wonder what happened to that book. It actually was really funny, at least as far as I got in it, it was funny. Anyway, I was trying to meet a daily quota of words, and it was probably 1,000. That's usually what I aim for, because 1,000 is generally doable, but it was not doable at that time in my life. And the way they were supportive was not, oh, Jill, you can do it, or hey, I'll watch your kids for a little bit while you get some of that done. Because there were usually exchanges that we could do, like I could watch your kids while you go do this, and you can watch mine but there was not really that kind of support so much. It was more like, well, maybe you should write 500 words a week instead of 1,000 words a day. And that was not really a very good solution. And there just wasn't a lot of support for females, because females were supposed to be the support person. They were supposed to support others and not have their own things, or at least not have their own things in as much as they would become important in their life, like having a writing career and a publishing career. And at the time I thought, well, if I could have a writing career, I could support my husband. I could support him financially with my writing career. But so that's why in many ways I just got along better with the unschoolers and not the fundamentalist Christian homeschoolers. Just could get on my nerves. Not all of them, like I said. The homeschool group in general had developed its own way of being peaceful with each other. Whenever you get homeschool moms, you get a lot of queen bees, and I definitely wasn't a queen bee, so at least I didn't get in mommy wars at all, because I just did not care. And I think that's another thing, is that a lot of those hippie unschooling moms were not queen bees, and they just wanted to have fun, they wanted to make this enjoyable. They didn't want to fight with other people. They don't want to be a queen bee. And so maybe that's the real reason why I got along with them, because I don't really like that. I'm not interested in being queen bee. I'm not interested in mommy wars. I don't care. I don't. I'd like to have friends. I like to have friends with other females. I think they're the best, the best of people, for other women. I think they're the best of people. We should be supporting each other. And yes, like I said, I will put a link to the last video that the Cozy Creative made. And you might, if you're a writer too, you might end up really liking her. She has a much more popular vlogger. She's a much more popular vlogger than I am. Video creator, I guess. Vlogger. I don't know. I think that some people use that term like when people are actually logging their daily life on video, but I use the term vlog like I would have used blog, as in a video journal rather than a written online journal, because that's what I was doing blogging way back in, I don't know, not the earliest of days, but in the fairly early days I started blogging. So I just use vlog in the same way that I might use blog. And to me, it doesn't really matter how long my videos are, or whether I make them every day, or whether I catalog my everyday life. I'm not going to do that. My life is super boring. I just work and play my accordion and write books. I mean, that's my life. And anyway, so I use that term loosely. I will put a link to her video, or maybe to her channel. I don't know. I just think if I like listening to the tone of her voice and like to hear her talking about her writing life, maybe you'll like it too. So that's all I have to say for today. Have a great rest of your Sunday. Oh, by the way, it is Divine Mercy Sunday, and I think that's what we all should be focusing on, is divine mercy and God's grace, rather than the solar eclipse, because I keep hearing all kinds of like prophecies about, oh, everything's going to end tomorrow, or all these bad things are going to happen. And I think about God's mercy, and I think about the fact that the Divine Mercy Sunday is the day before the eclipse. I mean, it's an eclipse. We've had so many eclipses. I don't know why this one particularly is so important to people, why it's getting so many negative prophecies. I really don't know. It feels like it's just getting a lot of hype, I guess. Anyway, so divine mercy. That's my focus for today. And with that, I will say goodbye. I wanted to add a quick update. On Wednesday, I will be doing an interview with an alien researcher, so look forward to that. It will probably post on Thursday. I hope you enjoyed the rest of the video. I just wanted to add a quick add-in that wasn't 100% true, that Christian fundamentalist moms didn't support each other if they had careers. I had one really good friend who supported me through anything, and she was opposed to women having careers, but she didn't care because she was a good friend. So I just wanted to add that, you know, human beings are not black and white, and they aren't they aren't stereotypes. That's all I wanted to say, and that's it.